So it's time for me to get the engine case onto the engine stand. And to do that, I'm going to mount obviously the right side of the case as we look at the engine from the other side. The right side of the case on the engine stand. And then we'll mate the left-hand side up when I have all the internals in. So to mount it, I'm going to use the original mounting holes here for the yoke. My car came, must be all the same, but 2 studs. I think these are 79mm, I'm not sure, but the M10 1.5 coarse thread. 2 studs here, 1 and 2. Then my car came with a short bolt that went in the top corner here of the transmission. I'm not sure I like that bolt. It's a little short. It doesn't sit in all the way when I test mount the transmission on the back of the engine. It's a little short. I like the fact that the stud uses all of these threads to hold the stud in itself into the engine. So I might swap this bolt out for an actual stud itself. Then there's of course the long bolt which goes in here for this starter. But I'm going to use the stud instead to hold everything onto the engine yoke. Good. All right, I'll torque those nuts down to hold it on there. But there it's on the engine stand. Great. Let's get it all beautifully clean and then I can start putting some stuff back inside. So before we do anything, let's check what Ollie's did to the case to renew it for the rebuild. I have the work order here, so we'll just go through what they did. The number one thing and the most expensive thing on here is of course the align bore. So the align bore are back to standard, which basically means they put the case halves together, torque them down, and then they put a big drill bit through here and actually drill out through where the crank sits so that any warpage in the case itself from taking it apart or usage is taken out. So it goes perfectly straight again. So they did that, 725. They did the time certs on the head, for where the head studs go in. They put these little steel inserts in either around the piston bores, so that the head studs won't pull out of the magnesium case. The steel won't pull out of the magnesium case, much stronger. So they did that here for the head studs, and they also did it for the trans mount as well. They welded at number 3, so that's on the other side of the case. So where the head studs go in here, they welded the back side of them here so that it's a little bit deeper, a bit longer. So all of the oil galleys on the engine, they all cleaned all those out, and then they put all of the new bungs in at the end, all of these sort of brass bungs, and then welded anything that I needed to clean up. I had a crack here and they fixed that for me. The crack was not there when I sent it. It got cracked when they were trying to put the bung in, but they fixed it. So that's great. They rebuilt the rods. They put new bushings in where the wrist pins sit, and they honed the actual rod itself, for the crank. They magnafluxed the crank. They did the oil plugs on the crank, and then they micro polished the crank too. So the cranks have gone through, all the rods have been gone through, and the case halves have been gone through too. And that cost me $2,222 with tax and shipping. So it's quite a bit of cash. The only other thing that I didn't ask them to do, which now I've upgraded to a later SC oil pump, a 4-rib oil pump, was the oil bypass modification. So I took the case down to Jay, my local machine shop here, and I asked him if he could just do the oil bypass on the case, and that was just 85 bucks. So now I'll just make sure it's all clean, go through it all, clean it all. They clean everything, but they hot tank dip it as well to clean it. And then we'll start adding the bearings, and we'll get some of this stuff back in there and get it back together. So the first step in the assembly process is the rods to the crank. Now I have everything I need to do this process laid out on the bench. I've got it on my clean tray here, so I can keep everything spotless. There's sort of no contaminants can get in there. Everything is super clean from Ollie's. It looks great, but I am going to clean everything again with some alcohol and my low lint wipes. And then once I've done that, I'm going to attach the flywheel to the end of the crank, and I'm going to stand it vertically to work on. But I'm going to use the new flywheel bolts and just not torque them down, just hand tighten them, just because these are a one-time torque deal only because they have a stretch value. So once I have the crank vertical, attached to my flywheel and everything's cleaned, I'll install new bearings. I'm going to use some plastic gauge to measure the tolerances of each rod on each journal. I'm going to use the old rod bolts to do that check. Torque these down to 36 foot-pounds. Disassemble them. Measure the plastic gauge spread to see if it's within tolerance. And then I'm going to use these ARP rod bolts that I have. Now, these want to be torqued to 50 foot-pounds, or the better way to measure it is its stretch value, the bolt's stretch value. And I bought the ARP stretch gauge. The stretch value is 0.009 to 0.0095. Okay, so these bolts are just loose. I can hand tighten them on each side. The stretch gauge, and I'll measure the side that's facing me. When the rod's facing me, I'll measure this side, and we'll set our stretch gauge, which is right there, to be 0. Okay, and lock that down. Okay, so that side is measured, zeroed out. I'm going to measure this side, and I'm going to set these little indicators here. So now that one's zeroed out at 25 is its start position on this side. So 25 plus this 0.95 is 120. So right here is 120. So that's perfect. So that's that stretch amount, and 0 to 95 is the other stretch amount. Okay, so I'm set up. And let's set my torque wrench to 10 foot-pounds. There you go, 10 on that side. Okay. Okay, now I'm at 20 foot-pounds, and I'm going to go back to the other side. And I'm going to come down. I heard it go to 20. There we go. 20. All right, let's set this thing to 30, you get the idea. 40 on this side. Okay, so let's measure the stretch on this side. So facing me, my stretch gauge is at 0.008 on this side. Let's measure this side. And here is about the same, maybe a tiny bit higher on that side. 48.9 gives me, so you can see here I'm right at that 9.5. Perfect. 48.9, gonna remeasure, and that's me right at the money. I'm happy with that. So that seems to be the way to do it, for me anyway. Now I'm very confident that these two bolts are torqued correctly and stretched correctly. And I'll move on to the next. So the first job is to actually clean the case halves. Ollie's did a really great job. They are absolutely spotless, but I'm going to clean them again and again. They've been sitting here quite a while. So I'm going to clean them with some good old brake cleaner. I'm going to use this isopropyl alcohol. It comes in a squirty bottle from your local pharmacy. And I'm going to use these lint-free Kimtech wipes to clean the whole surface of the bearing journals, as well as the inside of the case, both halves, and then we'll start putting some internals back in. So I was getting ready to install the oil pump and intermediate shaft, and I thought I'd just read through Wayne's book one more time. And it says here that if you have an early case, 65 to 69, then the intermediate shaft rides directly on the metal of the case. Now I've installed a bearing here and it fit perfectly, so I went back and looked at the pictures of the when I tore the engine down, and I noticed there was no bearing here. It rode directly on the surface of the case, on the metal of the case, the intermediate shaft. And there was no notch. Now there's a notch. So obviously Ollie's had gone through and modified the case to accept an intermediate shaft bearing. I'm going to give them a call, ask them about this modification, just to make positively sure that's exactly what happened. But I'll go ahead and install the screen and bearings and everything else I can without actually installing the oil pump and intermediate shaft. Install it with the tab and the notch. Push it down nice and evenly. I've made the mark on the side to where the dowel pin lines up with the case, and now I'm just going to add some of this curl tee around the outer edge just so I can get a nice seal. I'm going to put the seal in. Just going to tap it with my little mallet, try and get it square. Alright, next is this seal. Goes around the outer edge. I'm going to give this a bit of oil. And this goes, hopefully I don't break it, it's the only one I've got. Around this outer edge. And into this valley here. And that is it, ready to go back onto the crankshaft and installed in the case. Before I remove the crankshaft from the flywheel, I'm going to clean the journals one more time, and then I will prepare the crankshaft for installation into the case. Now I'm going to add some assembly lube to the crank journals. I've positioned the rods, going from the top 2, 4 and 6 in the upright position, and that's how it's going to drop into the crank. I'm going to turn the nose bearings so that the line is right at the front. And the idea is I'm going to hold it by these rods. That one's going to want to go down. I'm going to hold it by the rods and I'm going to try and get it over there with holding these two, or maybe even these 3 somehow. Anyway, I'm going to hold it with the 3, move it over, let the 3 drop down. I don't have any help here today, but hopefully this is going to work. We'll get it in there. Let's turn this to the top position. Just ran a bead of Loctite 574 for the rear seal and the nose bearing seal. Alright, I'm going to very carefully drop the crank. It's good. Down and rotate that nose bearing, which will smudge the Loctite in a bit. There you go. And that is it. In there. Perfect. And the rear seal is seated too. In and looking good. So I called Ollie's this morning and I confirmed with them that they did indeed bore out for the intermediate shaft bearing, make that modification, do that in all these early cases. They just said put a standard intermediate shaft bearing in there and you'll be good to go. So I've got everything laid out for the intermediate shaft, the oil pump, timing chains and gear. So I can go ahead and clean the timing chains. I just sprayed them with some brake cleaner. And I'm just going to wipe them down and make sure they're all clean before I install them. eBay find of the century, my $200 oil pump, my 4-rib oil pump, which is in absolutely perfect condition, is all cleaned up and ready to go. And I will assemble it all and then install it in the case. And the shaft. Alright, I'm going to try and do, there you go, let's get one chain through and one going over the side of the case. And then get this in the right orientation. Boom. Let's just make sure that's okay. Chain. Excellent. Going to make sure this oil seal at the back is seated properly and all the bearing surfaces are mated correctly. The teeth are meshed. That's good. Alright, so it's in. It's great. I'll check that seal out. So I got myself one of these borescope cameras and it hooks right up to the phone, and I can use it to check if that seal is seated correctly. I'm going to hit the record button on here and then I'm just going to place the camera inside. Oh, twisted a bit, left, right, and yep, there it is, and it looks like it's seated perfectly. Look at that, excellent. Alright, great, I'm confident that I can tighten that down and it is seated perfectly. So I bought new tab washers which go on the pump and you bend the tabs down over one side and up over the nut. I didn't want to reuse the old ones. They're in pretty bad shape and one of the tabs actually snapped off as I was trying to remove it. And I'm worried about metal fatigue and one of these tabs actually snapping off, becoming weak and snapping off in the engine and going for a ride around the engine. It would destroy it, or it would do some damage, that's for sure. I know that people don't actually like using these tab washers and they actually use a wave washer and Loctite instead, but I'm going to use the wave washers. They served this engine for 200,000 miles. They'll do another great job at 200,000 miles, so I'm going to use the blue lock thread though for sure. So I'm going to get that put on here and get it locked down to 18.4 foot-pounds. In the garage today.
Hi.
This is Logan. Nephew almost, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, alright. We're going to put the case house together, aren't we? All right. First thing is that zip tie's got to go through this hole. There you go, I got it.
Got it?
Yeah, now.
Those two go in there.
Yeah, oh look at that, the rods are balancing pretty well. Now I'm gonna, yeah, we're good with those. Now we're just gonna pull, you pull that. Let me just, right, the rods are good.
That looks good.
That looks good. Let's just put it over the side. Come on. Yeah, now have a look on this side. That looks good. We'll start putting through bolts. A couple of nuts just to keep it secure. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 11. 11. Alright, all the O-rings are on that side, and we're using Vaseline, aren't we? We're going to add the O-rings to this side, and we're using Vaseline, told by a prominent engine builder. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Here.
So this one. Alright, let's go for 25.8. Are you ready? Yep. Okay, number 2. So that one is which one for me? This one.
Yep.
Are we sure about that?
There's one there.
Oh, because the cylinders are offset. It's so confusing. Okay, you got it held. Okay. Okay. 3. Okay. Okay.
11.
11.
Over here.
That's that second last one.
That one there.
Yes. That means that's mine there. You want it? Let's go.
And then 12 and 13.
Great.
Are they 18 or are they 25 as well?
Same. Here, these are classes of through bolts. Okay, so we're good to go. We're going to put the flat side down and the rounded side up, okay? Careful they don't drop into the engine, okay? If they do that, we're in big trouble. Alright, I'm going to tighten the outer nuts to 18.4 foot-pounds. Gonna install a thermostat. I've got a new O-ring from my engine gasket kit. I'm gonna put some oil on there. Make sure that it sits properly, and then the holes are on lower right here and then upper left. So I'm gonna get the orientation correct. The lower one on this side, upper one on that side. There it goes. Excellent. And we'll tighten that down. So with the oil bypass modification done on the case and for the SC oil pump, I'm going to use these new pressure relief pistons. These are the later type. They don't have the holes in them like the old. and I upgraded to the new cap with a 17mm socket for easier installation. Here's the new piston for the underside. It has a longer spring, so I'll just got a bit of assembly lube on there. So that should go down there. I'm going to put the long side in, and it goes underneath the chain, and then we're going to locate the first bolt through the hole. And this one doesn't have the little catch, the little tab that catches on the actual bolt itself as a originator, and it catches on that to position it correctly inside the chain housing. Pretty well. They all have the Loctite 271 holding them in place, and torqued them down best I could. I'm going to check the deck to see how level that is. The more level the deck is, the better the insulation of the top end will go, and that is perfect. I see no gaps between anything there. That's great. Excellent. And then the studs, again, they all went in perfectly at 135mm. Some are a millimeter out, maybe 1mm out on a couple of them. But there's not any that are more than 135mm, and I think that's the point. So there's two on that side that are maybe 134. But yeah, that's good. All right, excellent. So I've gone ahead and attached the flywheel to the crank. I've just hand tightened the bolts right now. And then I've put my little tool here to lock the flywheel against the case. So everything's locked in place at one turn. And then I have this 12mm 12-point socket that I bought just to tighten the flywheel bolts. And it's too long. It actually touches the yoke. There's only a tiny space. I can't get my wrench in there. It just seems crazy. It's this long. So instead of ordering another one, or I don't want to remove the engine from the engine stand and reattach it just to tighten these bolts, it seems crazy. I got a T55 bit. It only has 6 points instead of the 12, but I might try an old bolt in here and torque that one down and see how that goes. I can now install a crankshaft pulley with the dowel pin going in the hole, and a lock washer and a nut. And I'm going to go ahead and torque this to 59 foot-pounds. So the T55 tool didn't do a great job of torquing these bolts down. So I've just put a piece of tape over here to remind myself that when I take the engine off the engine stand to swap these bolts out with the new ones, I'll add the Loctite at that time and then torque them with the correct tool to 110 foot-pounds. I should, let's give it a go. This is exciting, be able to, oh yeah, look at that. Turn the engine over and it feels good. Look at that, everything's working like it should. Fantastic. Excellent. Well, I'm really pleased. So with that all done, we have ourselves a short block. It's taken a couple of weeks to get here with all the measuring and the cleaning and then the assembly. I work a couple hours in the evening and a few more hours at the weekend, but we got here, you know, taking my time, learning as I go. The next phase is going to be building out the top end. And I've got some new 81mm pistons, high compression, and I bored out the cylinders. And with the case being decked, I need to work out the distance between the new piston and the head and how to measure that. I'm not quite sure exactly how to do that correctly, so if you have any ideas, please leave a comment below. I would like to give a shout out to Mike M. You should check out his YouTube channel. He is restoring a 67 or is it a 68 911, and the quality of work is unbelievable. The guy really knows what he's doing. I'm learning as I go along, but he really knows his stuff, so you should check it out. I'm learning so much by watching him work. I'll leave a link in the description so you can find his channel. Anyway, so I am going to continue building this engine out, and hopefully we'll get it done in the next few weeks.